Alex at bodyperformance.net, and this is week 10 of the bench press program. So we're only 5 weeks out from the competition now in Kamloops, BC on August 21st, 2016. So things are starting to get a little bit heavier now, starting to lower the volume a little bit as compared to some of the other weeks, and getting a bit boring as far as the exercises are a lot the same. Like, there's not much accessory work going on. It's getting, as you get closer and closer to the competition, I believe in doing more and more specific stuff towards what you're actually practicing for. So I drop out pretty much all, or not pretty much, I drop out all of the accessory work. Probably 4 to 5 weeks out is pretty standard for me. That's not necessarily set in stone, but that's a pretty common thing for me to do. This time I dropped it actually a little bit earlier. I think it was about 6 weeks. I was still doing a little bit of accessory work just on off days and stuff like that, but not enough that I actually even recorded it. Mostly band pull-aparts and stuff like that, which I'll still continue to do some of that just as a rehab type thing to keep my shoulders safe and feeling good. So let's get right into it right away. There's not a lot of exercises to go over here, and then when we get to the charts at the end, we'll just look at the trends that we're seeing as we go along. So on the 18th of July, I did pause bench press, Pinkies still on the rings. I did 140 kilos for 4 sets of 4 on that, and 2,240 kilograms of volume, and that's the only thing I did that day. So these workouts aren't taking very long, especially in comparison to the ones that I did when I was in my volume phase. As we look at the chart later on, where you see how high the volume was compared to how high it is now, or how low it is now would be more correct. You'll see that it's quite a difference, and that makes a big difference in how long your workouts are actually taking. Because even when I was doing the higher volume work, my rest periods weren't short. For some of the exercises like curls and stuff like that, they weren't too long. But in my bench work, my main bench work and other big exercises, I was still resting 3 to 5 minutes in between. So those are some long workouts, maybe 2.5 hours, some of them. Whereas some of these workouts might take me half an hour. Okay, moving on to the next day, which was the 19th. I did pause bench presses again. I went 135 kilos for 3 reps, 4 sets. 1,620 kilos of volume on that day. And then I did squats because I'm doing the 3 lift now. I do have 3 squat days in my week and 2 deadlift days. Usually, I believe on this week I only did 1 deadlift day because my back was a little bit sore on one day. Nothing to worry about, but I didn't bother because my main focus is still the bench press. I'm not gonna push myself in the squats and deadlifts, especially if I don't have to. So on the squats, I did 170 kilos for 3 triples. The next day was the 20th of July. Paused bench presses again. Pinkies still on the rings. Working up in some doubles. I did 120 kilos for a double, 130 for a double, and then did 5 doubles at 145 kilos. So that's 1,950 kilograms of volume. I did do deadlifts this way, so there you go. You have to realize I'm filming these from the future. I'm about 2 weeks behind in the actual filming, so I have to remember back to exactly what I did as well. So you have to bear with me as I go through that. So the deadlifts, I did 175 kilos for a single, 185 for a single, and then 195 for 3 singles. So that's not incredibly heavy for the deadlifts, and like I said, I'm taking it pretty easy on those. On the 21st, squats again, I did 175 for doubles, and I did 5 sets. So that was a fairly good amount of volume for squats, nothing too crazy. And then my paused bench press with Pinkies on the rings again, I did 135 for 2 sets of 5. So you can imagine how long that takes me to do 2 sets of 5. It's not a very long at all. My warm-ups, I probably did, I don't know for sure, but it was probably about 3 or 4 sets of warm-ups at the most, probably triples. And then 2 sets of 5, that takes me, even if I'm resting 5 minutes in between, that takes me 10 minutes. So that's a pretty short workout. Definitely a lot more time spent on squats there than on bench press. So now that brings us into the Saturday, which is the mock meet, or the weekly mock meet that I've been doing the last few weeks. That's the 23rd. For my squat, I did 175 for a double, 195 for a double, 205 for double. So I'm still sticking with doubles this far out. I'll probably be transitioning to singles in, I think, about 2 weeks, but don't hold me to that. I may adjust as needed. Then my competition bench press, which actually is the thing we're talking about, what actually matters. So pinky or index fingers out onto the rings on these. Full gear that I would be wearing in the competition, except for maybe knee sleeves. I have the knee sleeves on here because I was too lazy to take them off in between the squat and the bench press, or the squat and the deadlift, so I left them on through the bench press. Whether I'll actually wear them, they don't add anything to your bench press, but if you take them off, I do like to wear them for the deadlift, so if I take them off, I got to put them back on, and I'm pretty lazy, so I might not want to do that. The bench press, doubles on there. I was going up to the heaviest double that I've attempted in recent memory, really. So I didn't want to wear myself out too much on my warm-ups. So my first warm-up, I did 120 kilos for a double. Then on 140 and 150, I only did singles on those, just to save myself, because I knew that the 160 kilo for a double was going to be a push. Like I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I'm still debating whether 160 is going to be my opener. I might go a little bit lower depending on the day when I've actually made weight, because I'm probably going to have to cut a little bit of weight, and that can affect your bench press for sure. Obviously, my main goal is to go after the bench press record, but I also want to be smart about it. I'm not one to go into a meet and go after a number when it's not there and end up bombing out or something like that. That's not how I roll. So as of right now, I'd like to say 160, which I hit for a double here, is going to be my opener, but we shall see. Then my deadlifts, I went 175 for a single, 195 for a single, 215 for a single, and 225 for a single. I believe that's going to be my probable deadlift opener as well. And the squat that I did today, the 205, that's a probable squat opener. So, like I said, those can certainly change as we go along. But as of now, I felt pretty good this far out, 5 weeks out, being able to hit my openers for doubles. So let's look at the graphs now. We go to the average daily intensity. When you look at the average daily intensities to last week, it's not a significant increase, but it is an increase. If you look at the highest day last week, which is day 5, and that's the way it's going to be probably right through to the end now, will be that Saturday. I'm not going to be training probably 5 days a week the whole way through, but that Saturday is going to be the highest intensity day. Last week the would have been a Wednesday, I think. Day 3 was right up there as well. But this week, the day 5 was the obvious heaviest day because it was the competition practice. And as I get going down into singles, that's obviously going to get even heavier. Probably there'll be reps definitely in the 92.5% range, especially for the squat and the deadlift. Bench press might even be a little bit higher than that. I tend to program or I don't program percentages, but I tend, when I look at it after the fact and figure out what the percentage of my projected 1 rep max is, my bench press tends to be higher a little bit than my squat and my deadlift. So if I was to open with what I did for bench press today, and then I used the record, which is 165.5 as a projected max, I'm about 96%. So that's way higher than I would ever go with my squat and my deadlift. So my squat, my deadlift, my opener is typically between 87 and 90%. Anyways, on to average daily pressing related volume. So if you look at the volume from this week, I'm actually slightly higher than I was last week. The day 1 being the highest, and then the next day was actually pretty much in line with what I did last week, and then a little bit higher on day 3. A little bit higher on day 4, and then the volume on day 5 is actually lower than it was last week, but my intensity was higher. And that's what the wave tends to look like, is as your intensity is going up, your volume is probably going down. You'll have the rare day where your volume and intensity will both be high, but you're not going to have too many of those days throughout the cycle. Looking at an average weekly intensity. So if you look way back the first 5 weeks, you see how the intensity gradually went up. And then we had the big drop off when we had the injury week. And then even on what was kind of a deload week, which was the next week, the intensity came back up and stayed pretty flat for 2 weeks. Now it's climbed the last 2 weeks, not a huge amount. We're only looking at 81% and 83%, so it's not a huge difference, but it has that gradual increase, and that's what I was talking about. As the volume is going down, the intensity is going up, and that should be the trend that you see as you go along. And we look at our pressing related volume for the week. It was last week, well, we go back 2 weeks, it was a pretty moderate amount of volume, and then last week was lower, and then this week was slightly higher. So the volume is still not yet. I don't believe in doing flat volume where you're pretty much staying the same for too many weeks in a row. I like things to be waved throughout the cycle. So they're going to be waved within ranges. Like if you look back into the higher volume phase, you can see that the volume is consistently high, but it still has a wave into it. Then when we went into our strength phase, which is an obvious drop in volume, a very obvious drop when you look at the graph, you see that there's a couple weeks there where it's reasonably flat, then we have a high week, and then it comes back down to another 2 weeks that are similar, but it still has a wave to it. And as we get the next few weeks going in there, that trend is going to be even more obvious. It'll be these charts, if they're ever going to be interesting, is going to be interesting right at the very end when you can actually look at them, look at the total weeks and see the progression that the volume takes and see how that relates to the intensity. So the last one here is we're just once again looking at sets, reps, and total reps for the day. So because my volume was actually slightly higher this week, I had some days where the total reps were higher than last week. But if I took my average throughout the week of all my reps I still came out to an average of, I think it was 10.2 or 10.5 per day. So there's a few days like I had 16 on the one day and then to a low of 6 on the Saturday. So that also coincides with how heavy of weight you're actually lifting. Saturday being the heaviest day, that was obviously the least amount of reps, and the least amount of reps per set and the least amount of total reps overall. So that's it for today. That pretty much sums it up. We're closing in on it now. Stay tuned for next week, week 11, and things are going to start really building into the peak now. So it's going to get not exciting as far as looking at the program itself. You fall asleep if you just read the program, but to actually look at what's happening with the intensity and volume and how it relates to each other, that might be interesting to some. Kevin Weiss, bodyperformance.net. Talk to you again next time.